Hello, I'm Ted Besner, owner of Solve the Culture Puzzle, and I do cross-cultural communication training. Okay, cross-cultural communication training. What's that? Well, the North American workplace has become more diverse than ever, and the business world is becoming more interconnected across cultures than ever before. So cross-cultural communication training is simply understanding how people think, act, work, and lead in different cultures. It would be great if they gave you a manual on how people think every time you got off a plane in a new culture, or every time you hired someone from a different cultural background other than your own, or every time you promoted someone who had great technical skills, but maybe they don't have much experience dealing with different cultures. Well, no one gives out that manual or that rule book, and that's exactly the gap I fill with my cross-cultural communication training sessions. My presentation is on how to use cross-cultural communication, both the theory and the techniques, in order for you to save time, money, and frustration starting right now when dealing with people from different cultural backgrounds. That's what it's all about. So maybe you have people from different cultures who work for you or work with you, or maybe you're dealing with them as customers or providers or suppliers. If they're from a different cultural background, they will think, act, and try to solve problems in a way that's different from your own. Maybe it's slightly different, but maybe it's very different. For example, Canada and Mexico, some differences. Canada and China, a world of differences. And you've got to understand these differences now more than ever as this world becomes more and more interconnected. When I run a training session, my goal is to give you 10 things that you can start doing differently immediately to save you time and money and frustration. 10 easy and straightforward things. Things that make sense. That's my goal whenever I run a training session. And I think that's realistic, and that's what most people want. They want a good return on their time invested. Let me give an example of the sort of idea or concept that we look at. Up here I've got something called cultural speech rhythms, and this will really make you think if you're working across cultures. Maybe you've seen it, but you've never recognized it for what it is. But it's a bit of a head scratcher. Up here I've got Anglo, Latin, and Oriental. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look at a conversation from anyone in the English-speaking world, anyone in Latin America or France, Italy, Romania, even parts of Belgium, Portugal. And then down here for Oriental, we're really talking about Chinese, Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, as well as mainland China, but also South Korea and Japan. Up here in the English-speaking world, let's look how this conversation flows. Person A speaks, and when person A has finished, person B begins. Once person B has finished, person A speaks again. And when that person's done, person B responds once again. And on it goes. Why do we do this in the English-speaking world? Well, we're taught from a very young age not to interrupt. We're also taught that equality is extremely important, and we both deserve roughly the same amount of airtime. Now, it gets more interesting here. Let's take a look at, for example, a business meeting in Mexico. Person A starts to speak, and before person A is finished, person B jumps in, interrupts, talks over top of person A. Before person B finishes, person A has started to speak again, and they continue like this, and the volume level can really increase, and the intensity can go really high. Now, if you're from the English-speaking world, this is going to make you scratch your head the first time you see it. Why do these differences occur? In the English-speaking world, like I said, we're taught that equality is really important. But what are they taught in Latin America? Passion is very important. And if you're not passionate, you're not committed or involved in the discussion. You can see how important this distinction is, for example, with a sales and engineering team. Well, now it gets really interesting. What if you've sent a team to somewhere in Asia? Let's say it's mainland China, and you're in a business meeting. Person A is going to speak, and then there's going to be silence, sometimes for several seconds. Then person B responds thoughtfully, then silence. Person A speaks again, silence. Person B responds. Now that's interesting, and it's drastically different from the other two examples. Why? What's the cultural value that underpins this? Respect. In some cultures, showing respect to the other person's opinion is more important than being passionate. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm saying they're different, and you've got to understand it. Because if you have a team of salespeople from Latin America dealing with an Asian customer, you can imagine the difficulties in the first meeting they have. And if you get off on the wrong foot, you may be dead in the water. This is an example, really quickly, of the sort of ideas and concepts that I'm going to throw at you in this training session to give you a lot to think about how you're working with people from different cultures. Really quickly about my background, I've been doing cross-cultural communication training for about 10 years. I've worked in Canada, the US, Mexico, Brazil, Ireland, Austria, Germany, Czech Republic, India, Japan, and China. So I've been lucky enough to learn from people in many different cultures around the world. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't work when dealing with people from different cultural backgrounds and forming teams out of those people. I learned the theory of cross-cultural communication at University of British Columbia, but I've lived it in the field, in the world of production, both in the office and on the production floor. And I continue to learn every day, every time I run a training session around the world. I always focus on making everything we discuss simple to start doing right now. In fact, I give you lists of what to do and what not to do for a variety of different situations and circumstances. Let's be honest, most of us only remember a few things from any training session we attend after a couple of months. But the more involved you are in a training session, the more stories you hear that illustrate points like this, the more you're engaged in the material and interact in an experiential way, the more you retain. And that's really important. So I organize my sessions to be both experiential and interactive. As well, I make sure that everyone has a good, solid, full-color manual with tons of information and tons of reference points that they take with them, of course, because that just helps in the learning long term. And I also refer you to my blog as well for further reference. That's my training style. I don't put up PowerPoint slides and read them. I make sure that people enter into the discussion, share their own stories, and uncover simple tips that will help you immediately save time, frustration, and money. So to summarize, why is cross-cultural communication important now? What's in it for you? Why should you care? Well, borders in the business world are disappearing. We're interconnected around the world in a way our grandparents could only dream of. So our teams here at home are also made up of people from the four corners of the globe. So how do you lead them most effectively? How do you get the most out of each employee? How much more effective could your team be if everyone understood each other a little better wherever they may be from? How much more impact could you have with your customers if you took just a few hours to really deeply understand how they think and make buying decisions? And that's exactly why this training is important and why it's so interesting to learn about. I guarantee you will be exposed to ideas that will make you re-examine how you deal with cultural differences, and you'll enjoy yourself while you learn. So thank you. I'm Ted Besner, and looking forward to meeting you and helping you solve the culture puzzle.